This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Today's episode of the Motor City Sports Rant is brought to you by The Athletic, premium coverage for passionate Detroit sports fans. Listeners of this podcast can save 20% off the first year of an annual subscription by visiting theathletic.com/DSP. Don't miss out on amazing Detroit sports coverage and even in-depth features nationally. Go visit theathletic.com/DSP to subscribe and save.
Detroit is the greatest! Straight up light you on fire for a Coney dog right now.
Darren McCarty comes back with Neiman in front of him. McCarty draws. McCarty in. McCarty scores! A magnificent goal! Darren McCarty!
Stafford takes, throws, end zone, Calvin, touchdown, Detroit Lions!
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Motor City Sports Rant on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. We're back. We're better than ever. We're recharged. I am, as always, Jason Jarvie. Follow me on Twitter at Jarvie the King. And back in studio, along with this guy who just is getting back from vacation, John the Doc Macaroon. What's up?
What a perfect time for me to take the vacation. The weather here in Michigan wasn't that great. Florida weather, always nice. As you noted, before we started, I'm looking tan, I'm looking fly, ready to record the podcast. Not just another podcast, Jason, episode 150 of the Motor City Sports Rant. Going strong for a couple years now. Very proud of this project, very proud of the Motor City Sports Rant and where we've taken it. All is good, and this is the week, baby. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone is looking at what the Detroit Lions are going to be doing. The entire Detroit Lions organization is on the hot seat. They got to come up with an idea of what to do. Right now, as it sits, the Detroit Lions have 6 draft picks. Many people believe that there's going to be an opportunity for the Detroit Lions to be aggressive and possibly either trade that number 20 pick back and try and get additional picks, or maybe make some moves either to move up or down in this stuff. And it's an amazing time to look at what the Detroit Lions are going to do this Thursday, 8 o'clock. Everyone is going to be watching. It's going to be a fun time. How excited are you for this year's draft? Because it's very important with a new head coach, with a new regime. You want to kick it off right. And Bob Quinn probably has to do a really good job, because you know that people are going to be a little bit skeptical, especially since that schedule was released. And we will definitely talk about the schedule as well.
You know, I'm always excited. Whenever draft comes along, it's Christmas. You get to find out who's going to be on your team next year. I mean, unless you go back to when the San Diego Chargers drafted Eli Manning, and then of course didn't end up with Eli Manning, ended up with Phillip Rivers. It's exciting to see what they're going to do, and I'm going to stick by my stance that not everybody's going to be happy with whoever the Lions are going to pick. And I know we'll talk about the possibilities of who's going to be on the board at the time when the Lions come around. But I think it's going to be really hard to mess this draft up and mess this pick up, because I think there's a fair amount of talent, as long as they don't get crazy and like really try to reach for somebody. Whoever this player is going to be, they're going to help out this team.
Exactly. And what has been your approach to looking at mock drafts? Do you look nationally? Do you look locally? What's been your approach in terms of evaluating the college talent? I mean, many people are a little bit skeptical now of the experts because they put out 6 and 7 versions of mock drafts. People are kind of saying, you know what? It really is up in the air, because general managers, when they do kind of sprinkle out information, there's this word that people are kind of coming up with now. It's a smokescreen, kind of putting out information to try and block other GMs from really knowing what's going on. It makes it fun, too, because we put out one. Everybody locally, nationally that's into sports really kind of researches and does it. But what's your approach, and what would you say others that are into mock drafts, what should they do in order maybe to get as much information? Because really in the end, nobody really knows what's going on. Only the people that work at Allen Park.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar with the NCAA tournament. Nobody really knows who's going to go where in this draft, and there's going to be at least one player who it's going to be a crazy thought, that why are they drafting him so high, or why is this guy dropping so low? So there's going to be a lot of that on draft day. And the way that I view this, I look at it 3 ways. I think it is helpful to at least get a guideline of where all these players rank by looking at all the lists. I mean, definitely ESPN, Walter Football, and there's a bunch of places online that you can look at to give you kind of a guideline of where a lot of these players at least rank overall, and then where they're going to fit and where they might be going in these drafts. So I like to look at it's really the eye test. You can look at their stats and see how they did in college, and it doesn't always translate into NFL, which is why you need more checks and balances when you're looking at these players and trying to evaluate how they're going to be in the National Football League. You look at the stats, how they did going all through, and then you really, if you really want to get in depth and get a feel for how these players are going to be, you have to look at tape, and you have to look at how they did, how they looked, playing in college, and you take into account who they're playing. Are they, who's the quarterback from Wyoming, Josh Allen. He may have crazy stats, but he's also playing on Wyoming. So it's trying to judge what they're actually going to be once they get into the NFL when they're playing against the top talent in the world. So I like to look at all that. I like to put it all together, and then you got to look at what the team needs, because I mean, unless it's a can't miss prospect that a team is going to take, their teams don't just take people just because that they're really good. Like you kind of have to see what you need on your team and then pick going forward. Like I wouldn't have picked Eric Ebron for the Detroit Lions back when they had the 10th pick, because Lions didn't really need a tight end. I think it was a position that we didn't need. It didn't fill any real need on this roster other than maybe trying to give Matthew Stafford another weapon, which obviously it didn't really work out in the end. It's going to be really telling seeing what Bob Quinn does come Thursday and what position they take and what player and what kind of if he's a risk player, if he's a safe player. And it's going to be really telling of what this franchise could be in the next couple of years.
With the draft, I found it interesting to kind of go look nationally to see what writers are kind of looking at, but I really don't look at specific players. I look at positions. And so what I think is interesting is that right now there is a little bit of a dichotomy, a little bit of some debate regarding whether the Lions are going to take someone for the offense or, solidify that, specific need at running back, or are they going to really address somebody that can clog up the middle on defense. And so for that does add a little bit of intrigue. But for me, in terms of what I think is best, obviously looking at potential linebackers or defensive ends or defensive tackles probably is in the Lions' best interest in order to improve the team, because you want to add depth in terms of the defense for Matt Patricia when he comes in. So that's what I do. I look at certain positions. I look at programs that are putting out really solid defenders, programs like Alabama, Georgia, things like that. And you look at the Detroit Lions, they're in the mix for a lot of quality players. And so when you see the wide range of players that are available for the Lions to pick, most importantly, I think you and I will agree that impact, somebody that can get on the field pretty quickly and adjust and learn and be flexible with Matt Patricia's defense, I do believe will be in the Detroit Lions' best interest. But many people are also looking at and going, you know what? Darius Geis, Chubb might be in the mix in early rounds for the Detroit Lions. Some others are looking at defensive tackles from Florida. Is there a draft pick that would, come across, or Bob Quinn could say, that would make you go, oh man, that's not the right guy? Is there anybody that you just don't want at this point in time, once you've read and looked? Is there anybody that you don't want the Lions to add to this version of the 2018 roster?
It's an old thing, but it comes back to it that I think, it may be dumb to say this again, but I think any wide receiver, if they took him in the first round, I think that would be a mistake. But, I don't think this team has moved past that. I think we're past the Matt Millen drafting a running back or drafting a wide receiver every single year in the first round. So I think they're going to make a smart decision. But if there's a player that would really surprise me at 20, that if they stayed there and they didn't try to move this, at least try and move this pick at all, it would probably be a running back. I know Saquon Barkley, not going to be on our team. And the one guy who I think would be interesting at 20 would be Darius Geis. I think anybody, though, any of those other running backs to take in the first round, I think it would be a mistake. I think Sony Michel, Ronald Jones, Nick Chubb, all those guys, I don't see them really worth the first round talent. They may be a first round talent. I think we have a better need, and I think there'll be players who will be better NFL players that'll be there at that point at 20. So, I mean, I'm gonna stick with my gut saying that we'll probably see somebody either on the offensive line or in the front seven on the defensive side.
Now, Jason, some messages have come across to us on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast, and when we started talking about the draft and looking at what the Lions are going to do at 20, some people have said, look, you know what, the way it's been covered, they are over the draft. They don't want to talk about all these players. They see that, different sites put out like 10 versions of their mock drafts. Usually nobody's really right 100% of the time. So a lot of people also have messaged us and said, look, you know what? I'm just going to start focusing on it this week. I'm not going to invest all that time in 18 versions of mock drafts. I'm not even that interested until after the draft is over. What do you say to those that are not that interested in the draft, and has the draft, in terms of the coverage locally, nationally, has it jumped the shark? Because for me, I'm really interested still. I check out all the mock drafts. I want to see. Now, in terms of accuracy, obviously, I'm not going to put a lot of stock and 100% faith in every single mock draft, but it is nice to kind of be in the zone, in the area of knowing what's going on. I'm surprised that some people who messaged us and that are saying, I'm not interested in the draft anymore, let's just get to it and evaluate after.
I have mixed feelings because I would say that I've experienced both. In previous years, I have looked at every single mock draft. Mainly on ESPN. I love looking at Kuiper and McShay's because those are the two biggest in the industry. So I always would look at them and try to compare. They were changing pretty much up to the day, and they never got it always right. But in this past year, with my life changing, I haven't had that time to really dive deep and research all these players. So, but I wouldn't say that I'm not excited about the draft. I think it's just it depends on what you're feeling. If I wanted to, I could dive back in and I could go in and look at all that stuff. And I think as a fan, I just like that it's there. You don't have to look at all that stuff because they're still making their money. They're still getting paid to make 10 versions of the mock draft. It's not going to change the fact that that last version is probably going to be the most accurate one. Because, look at so many mock drafts like 1.0 that there's players who are in the top 10 who aren't even selected in the first round at that point. It really just depends on what you're feeling and how much you really want to look into this draft. Because at the end of the day, just like fantasy football, it's a crapshoot. And we're not winning money unless people are actually betting on who's going to be going.
How are you taking the draft this year? It's going to be on Thursday night, 8 o'clock, NFL Network locally. You can also catch the first round on Fox 2. Where are you going to experience the draft? How are you going to watch it this year?
I'll probably be at home. It would be I may see what other people are doing. I know Buffalo Wild Wings has had an event before where they kind of do some sort of squares type thing or even just kind of like how they have a trivia night where they, give out like some free wings if you get a pick right or something like that. If somebody's doing that, I might be persuaded into going out, but more than likely I'll check in from home and I'll be watching from my iPhone and seeing who's getting drafted, and definitely be tuning in when it gets closer to 20 and seeing what the Lions are going to be doing.
Yeah, for me, usually I check into the first couple rounds, and then after that 4, 5, 6, 7, my interest kind of wanes a little bit. The first 2 or 3 rounds I'm really into, and when they make the pick for the Lions, I'll look at his previous stats, I'll look at his previous numbers and things like that. And then, when that Thursday comes and they announce it, I hope they stay at 20. I think that by then it'll be a couple hours into the draft and things like that. But at 20, most people, if you're listening, can realize that it's not going to be sexy. It's just going to be, somebody on the defense, I think, that's going to be, potentially out there. Many people are also looking at, the linebacker from Alabama. Some people are looking at the defensive tackle from Florida. But in the end, I do think, though, that the most important factor that has to take place for the Lions is they got to get somebody that's going to have some immediate impact.
And that's really all that we can ask for. Ask for somebody to come in and be able to play immediately. If, regardless of the position, outside of a kicker or a punter, if they can come in and provide good, quality play, that's all I'm asking for at that point. If Eric Ebron could have came in and just been a really good tight end, nobody would have had an issue with him. It's because he came in and was so bad and was a first-round pick. It was a waste.
I'd be really happy with Alabama linebacker Rashaan Evans. I think that, at 6'3", 234, the numbers that he put up at the combine really indicate that he can be pretty quick to learn, could be somebody that could also complement Jared Davis and things like that. So a linebacker wouldn't be too bad, potentially speaking. A lot of people are also looking at Mo Hurst and among other players.
No, I don't want Mo Hurst.
I know
on
you told
this
us.
team.
I know you told us that, but
dude has a heart issue.
He's projected to have some impact right away.
Let him have some sort of impact on another team. I don't want the possibility of some guy not playing on this team. Let somebody else take him. I pray to God somebody takes him before us, so we don't have to sit there at 20 and say, "Oh, Mo Hurst is there."
The position that usually kind of, at this point in time is going to make me go, is if they take Darius Geis. If they take him at 20, I can understand it, but I also think that you're wasting a first-round pick on an impact player when you have basically a kind of a trio of running backs now that could get the job done.
Can they get the job done?
If they decide to improve the offensive line later in the draft. If you improve the offensive line, then you could get by with LeGarrette Blount.
I also think they can address the running back position later in the draft.
Exactly.
For me, the first-round pick, I'd probably look at that defensive line. It's intriguing to go offensive line because you now have the right side with TJ Lang and Rick Wagner. Graham Glasgow moving over to center, and you got Taylor Decker at left tackle. So you got that left guard position. So if one of those guards is there, it's definitely going to be a question. I think Quentin Nelson's going to be gone. I think he could actually be one of the best, maybe even the top prospect in this draft. He's not going to go like that, but he's not going to be there. But definitely Will Hernandez out of UTEP and Isaiah Wynn out of Georgia. I'm looking at the defensive line. In particular, I want an edge rusher. I think one of the biggest things that this defense is lacking is pressure on the quarterback and actually getting sacks on the quarterback. You look at what great defenses can do in the NFL right now. They get to the quarterback. They create, even if they don't get sacks, that they're making it difficult for the quarterback. So I think the guys you're going to be looking at are Marcus Davenport, Sam Hubbard, and the guy who I think would be, he's kind of a dark horse who I'd be very interested if the Lions would after him, would be the former LSU defensive end, Arden Key. He left the team this past year. It was kind of odd circumstances. We haven't really found out everything. But he's one. I think if he would have played this entire year, he would have been ranked much higher. So I think he's an interesting pick at 20.
All right, Jason. Everybody looked, and now there's also a debate, not only with the draft, but also the schedule release. I was super excited last Thursday. It was, people were kind of starting to picture, okay, who's going to show up on Thanksgiving for the Lions? Who are they going to play? Where are the Lions going to open? When are they going to play? How many primetime games are the Detroit Lions going to be able to experience? And then that Thursday came out, and in a little bit, people are kind of noticing and expressing that, you know what? Why not just release at 9 a.m.? Let us at the same time kind of chomp and explore and analyze the schedule early. But then you obviously realize that when you have television and you can heighten expectations and get everybody riled up, then you can have this television program that everybody wants to watch later in the evening. So you understand why it doesn't take place earlier. But I cannot believe that there's a lot of people that are upset that people do the win-loss thing and they're like, that's stupid, that you can't predict it. Look, we're not taking it as gospel, but you can.
You look at it and you
do it. Everybody does it. It's like, how can you call it stupid? Because you look at, obviously, yes, there's going to be an additional 10, 15 players on every roster, but you do kind of look at how organizations match up, and there's nothing wrong with going down and doing win-loss. Everybody, since we started this project, when we started doing it, has been engaged with it. So that's why we keep doing it. We get well over a couple hundred responses. We get debates and things like that, and it sparks conversation. That's what sports is about. if you constantly play the wait and see approach in sports, it makes it really boring. I mean, okay, the schedule release and you go, okay, let's wait and see. That's not fun. You looked at it and right away, on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast, I made a mistake. I initially had them in our schedule mock 1. I had them at 9-7 when I had it done, win-loss, I have them beating Green Bay twice, splitting versus Minnesota, beating Chicago twice. And so in terms of the schedule, I have schedule results version 1.0, the Lions at 10-6. And I think they're going to have a decent chance. But at the same time, if I'm wrong in terms of the split with Green Bay, if I'm wrong with other losses, then potentially, you know what? It's not unreasonable if the Detroit Lions could go 7-9. And I think that range from 7-10 is realistic with this team. But that schedule came out, and if you have them losing early, which I do, we can look at maybe the first couple games. But what do you say to those that don't like going through and doing the wins and losses? I was kind of surprised because people really were aggressive in saying that they're losers and that there's no, you can't know the roster and things like that. And what about injuries? Well, of course, but we're talking about football right now in April.
Yeah.
So we're not there yet to analyze it. So if I ask you the schedule and I ask you to look at it, what do you think of those that hate on the win-loss people, and what do you got the Lions at? What did you do when you saw the Lions schedule?
If you don't like looking at the schedule and just analyzing, what could happen come September, you're not a real football fan. Not just Lions fan, you're not a football fan in general. I will do whatever it takes to talk about football because football is my favorite sport. The time between February and really right now to when this draft started, because I see this season as really starting right now. It started with free agency, but with the NFL draft, the mini camps and all those workouts are going to be starting, and you're going to start seeing more about football. It starts now, and I love football, and I'll stand by that. If you don't like talking about that, it's then you're not a fan. You're the guy who likes to go there and drink the $10 beers and isn't really there just to support his team. You're there for an experience. You got to be a super fan of this team to actually like this. Now, what I did when I saw this roster, I wasn't initially going to go through and really mark down what I thought what was going to happen. I was going to probably wait till this show and then we could go over it. But somebody actually posted on my Facebook timeline. They posted their prediction and they said at best 9-7, and what they actually thought it would be probably closer to 7-9. And it didn't sit right with me. I'm like, really? This team, who I would say they're not too far removed from being able to get into the playoffs consistently, you're gonna say that you think they're gonna be 7-9? So I took a more in-depth look at this schedule. I went over once and I was like, I got to 10-6. And I was like, okay, let me be a little bit more realistic. And I gave my realistic expectations and what I thought would be the best case scenario for this team. And what I came up with, and I'll go with best case scenario because I think that's what people will probably complain most when they hear this, is I think best case scenario for this team is they could be at 11-5.
That's best case scenario.
Yeah, I'm surprised that you haven't already flipped your lid and called me crazy for saying this team could be 11-5.
It's not terrible. It's not out of the realm of possibility because of the fact that you got a new coach, you got a new system, you have the semblance of a decent offense that can do some things. We all kind of believe that if you solidify the running game, that the team is not a total wash. But what people are concerned about is obviously injuries. What if something happens again to the offensive line? Depth is always an issue with these teams. And then you got to remember, too, that schedule. When you look at it, the first couple of games are going to dictate a lot. I have them actually early on. I have them struggling early in the year. The first 3 games, I got them winning the first game versus the Jets, and then I got them losing the next 2 versus the Niners and the Pats.
So in my evaluation of putting them at 11-5, as at best case scenario, they have to go to work and they have to take care of the teams that they know that we know that they can beat. So in the 11-5 schedule that I had them going 6-2 at home, losing only to the Patriots and to the Rams. Yep. They win the rest at home. On the road, they're taking care of teams like San Francisco and Miami, and I have them losing to Dallas, Minnesota, and Green Bay at home.
Gotcha. And I think the key game that people really kind of chided me on was I had them losing to Seattle. And that's a game where, you got to pick a game every year where you're expected to win. But by all accounts, the likelihood is the Lions can defeat Seattle because they've let go of a lot of talent. They're kind of now in flux. They're on the downside. But there's always a game where you're expected them to win and they don't play well, where maybe Russell Wilson does some things and he carries them on their back. Some fluky things can happen. So that's the game I have the Lions this year where they're supposed to win and they end up losing. So that's probably, one of the games where we differ and things like that. But I can't wait.
I know in my more modest, my realistic expectation of 9-7, I think I had them losing to Carolina at home, that's a game I feel like every time at home you should be able to beat Carolina. But for whatever reason, you just can't get it done.
Exactly. And so I can't wait early in the season. It's going to be a real test. They got to jump off and they got to do some things. The Lions are going to go on the road after they play the Jets, and they're going to go to San Francisco. And I think that's going to be a statement game.
I think it's a very winnable game, though.
Yes, I think that, okay, a lot of people have said that to me, but Jimmy Garoppolo versus Matthew Stafford, I can't wait. Marquee matchup.
I do not believe in Jimmy Garoppolo yet.
Dude, he put a lot on film, bro. He put a lot of quality film out there.
How many games did he play? He played how many films?
But he was able to win those games, and he put up some good stats, and you think they're just going to get worse. So that game's going to be a marquee game. I could be proven wrong, and I hope I am. But early on, I have that as a loss. I have that San Francisco is going to be really excited to play at home, and they're going to be definitely excited, Garoppolo, to play Matthew Stafford. And, new defense. You guys got to remember, everything's going to be new with the Detroit Lions in terms of scheme, in terms of, a new roster. And you guys all think that they're just going to gel right away. I actually have them having early on a 3-game losing streak, but then later in the year having a 3-game winning streak. So there's opportunities for the Lions to get better. And so I'm sacrificing early success in order to get to 10 wins. I think early on, it's going to take some time for the Lions potentially to really understand and get going with the Patricia philosophy, because remember, it's going to be bend, don't break. You're not going to have exactly as many rushers as you're going to need potentially to have a really pressuring defense. So you're going to have a bend, don't break kind of defense, and it's going to put a lot of pressure on your offense to score, maybe score late like they've been used to now. They've done it before, but early in the season, you're going to play the Patriots and you're going to play the Niners. You win those. There's some people that are really excited about the Lions and say, you know what? There's an opportunity for it to swing very wildly and have a great deal of variation. Some people have them going maybe 5-1 or maybe even 1-5 to start the year. That's how volatile this schedule is going to be and how important it's going to be for the Lions to get off to a good start. It could go wayward if they don't win versus the Jets in week 1. We never assume. Most of us have the Jets as a victory. You don't win that first game, the season could tilt in the negative direction. It could go wayward south where they don't get a win for the first 3 to 4 weeks.
So Lions have their bye week in week 6. First 5 games, what do you have them?
First 5 games, I have 2-3.
2-3. I look at this. I put them at 3-2.
Okay.
Because I say New York, San Francisco, and Green Bay those are wins.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that they're easy, that they're just gonna blow these teams out. I just feel confident that they can take care of those games. And I think the really telling game is going to be that week 3 and week 4, the matchup against the Patriots at home, and then going on the road to the Dallas Cowboys. Now, we don't know what New England and Dallas is going to be this year. Tom Brady technically isn't signed yet. They may be without Rob Gronkowski, and we're not sure what's going to happen with the Dallas Cowboys. No Des Bryant anymore. Hopefully Zeke Elliott's going to be playing for them. So it's really going to be interesting going into week 5. I would reasonably, I think they can be 3-2.
Okay. What do you make of the Bears Thanksgiving? The Lions pushed for a rival in the NFC, in the division on Thanksgiving. I kind of was like, man, you got the Rams. You got the Rams at home. You don't put them on Thanksgiving. You want a divisional foe. I just kind of, when I saw the schedule release and I started seeing that it was going to be somebody from the division, didn't want it to be Green Bay again. I didn't want it to be Minnesota. I wanted it to be the Rams. I wanted it to be a primetime fun experience. But knowing that the Lions have a pretty good record against the Bears in recent years, I'm okay with it, but it's not as sexy on Thanksgiving. Lions-Bears, that could be a dud game,
I want them
too.
to win on Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
I want to enjoy my meal. Okay. So get that win against the Bears, and then when you have to go take on the LA Rams the next week, you're gonna you're going to need all that time to prepare for them.
Okay, so you look at the schedule. It does have an opportunity to be favorable, but at the same time, that's what I love about the schedule. It also has an opportunity to go real south real fast. And that's that first game, Jets. Only two, well, you look at it, you have 2 primetime games in Thanksgiving. So you got 3 of your games with national TV exposure, but 2 in the first couple weeks. You okay with that in terms of the amount of exposure the Lions are going to get? 2 primetime games and then the Thanksgiving game, and the rest are pretty much, you're not going to London. You're not going to do anything, pretty much outrageous after the first couple weeks and then Thanksgiving.
I think as long as they don't embarrass themselves, I'm okay with that.
Okay. The schedule, man, it was exciting. I'm a schedule guy. I like to see the schedule. And obviously, look, after the draft, after injuries, of course they can change. We could do a win-loss thing every week, but that makes it fun. Don't be a hater. Don't be one of those people that's like, let's wait and see about everything, because then we could never really have sports debates other than factual information. That's no fun. On a Thursday, the Tigers just started their year. There's not a great deal of buzz regarding them, but we'll talk about them later in this podcast. So you're looking at the NFL, and I don't think there's an amount of overexposure if you're a fan. You can just pick and choose when you want to talk about and dig into the draft or the schedule. And if you don't want to, then back away. You can do other things as well, but there's opportunities for entities and media outlets to put it out there because people do want to see it. So I'm not one of those people that hates on those that are into it. If you don't want to check into it, then don't. But don't message me and be like, how dare you go do a win-loss? This is embarrassing. And I'm like, dude, I wouldn't do it if there wasn't a market for it. 1, and 2, we've done it every year. It's fun. It's fun to do. You get excited to do it, and then you move on. It's not like I go, oh my gosh, look at me. I did this and that. We do it for joking around and stuff like that. But don't be so serious all the time. It's sports. It's supposed to be fun.
Before we switch gears, I have one more draft question for you.
Sure.
Is there one move, regardless of what it is, on Thursday that would really surprise you with the Detroit Lions at 20?
Is if they moved up. I think if they move up, I'd be surprised if they were aggressive. I think that by all accounts, the consensus is that Bob Quinn is going to move back and acquire more talent. And so if they move up, we've always wanted them to be aggressive and go get somebody, but who would they move up and get? I don't think that that's in the cards. I think the thing that you could expect is either they stay at number 20, take somebody on the defense, maybe somebody from Alabama, maybe they attack that running back, maybe, but I think maybe a scenario in which they really go and seriously take a look at is moving down in the draft. Somebody that maybe slots up there that is, maybe a team, maybe some upheaval. You have to kind of hope. If you're a Lions fan, you got to hope that a really prominent player dips and he's there at 20 and a team wants him, because then you can get a little bit more for that 20th pick. But I'm just hoping that in the end, what I want to have happen is I want to see, and I know people don't rate it as serious, and they don't take it as gospel either, is the draft grade. I just want them to be in a B+, A-. I just want people to be like, the Lions killed it in this draft. And I know you got to wait a couple years to even evaluate talent, but I don't want to have happen what happened last year, where right away we were like, you know what, first couple games, Kareem Hunt's there and doing some things, and our guy, we're going, oh man, still waiting on Jared Davis to kind of pick up the pace. I don't want a project. I want a ready-made, get on the field guy to contribute. I don't want a learning guy.
Yeah, and I'm glad we're on the same page, because I was going to say the same thing with moving up in the draft. I think what it says if they go and do that is that whoever we're moving up to draft, this is the player that's going to be that crucial piece on your team. And I think there's very few pieces in this draft, unless you're going all the way up to number 1 and you're looking at drafting a guy like Bradley Chubb or a Saquon Barkley. But at that point, you're giving up so many assets that you may just be hurting the team more than actually trying to fix it.
You got it. Let's take our first time out. We'll come back, finish the podcast. We got to look at the Tigers, 9 wins, 11 losses, first 20 games. Maybe surprising some, maybe disappointing some. You say, huh? Some people are upset. I'll tell you why. Some people who follow us, and maybe even this host, might be a little upset with the Tigers at the way this season started. We'll tell you why next on the Motor City Sports Rant on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Jason, I want to tell you about our host site, Podomatic.com. When Adam and I first started this project 5 years ago, we were looking for a great place to host all of our recorded audio. Thank goodness we found Podomatic. Why do we use them? very easy to use. We have verbal warfare, we have great sports debates, great interviews, and when we're done, we take all that quality audio and we upload it to Podomatic.com. We've only used one host site here on the network. Jason, Adam, Vito, Steve, everyone here on the network is going to recommend Podomatic if you want to reach the level of success that we have. Go check out Podomatic.com if you're starting a brand new podcast.
Yeah. Hey. Yeah. Hey. Yeah. Boys. Yeah. Hold on. We them boys. Hold on. We them boys. Hold on. We making noise. Hold on.
Yes, sir, Jason. You know who's making noise? The Detroit Tigers. People are surprised at their start. 9 wins, 11 losses, a couple walk-offs, some young, unheralded players doing some things. The likes of Jimmer Candelario, Jacoby Jones, they're stepping up and doing some things. They're contributing. But I look at it and I go, I only had one goal for the Tigers in 2018. Earn the number 1 pick. That is it. And so, yeah, they're competing. Yeah, it's fun. But if you're not the worst team in baseball and you don't have a chance to compete, I mean, this team, theoretically now are in contention. They're not eliminated. They're playing well. It's entertaining. I know people are scared and, they don't want to kind of keep talking about the word tank, but this is a rebuild. You know it. I know it. This is a rebuild. So when you're rebuilding, what do you need? Talent. This collection of talent on this 25-man roster is not going to be here in 5 years. Right now, everybody that's contributing, Jacoby Jones, Castellanos, Liriano, you want to move them to acquire more talent so that in 4 or 5 years, you have a team that can compete. So it's nice to see the Tigers win. Here's the biggest problem that Major League Baseball is facing. A lot of teams suck. A lot of teams in the American League, when you look at their rosters, are going to suck. So you can't have a contest of who's going to suck that much worse, in that it's hard to tank when the rest of the league is not doing well either. They're 9-11. I would be okay if they were 1-19. It doesn't matter to me, but on the other spectrum, they are playing well. They look like a fun team. They're not quitting in games. Ron Gardenhire has this team in terms of sabermetrically, at least. Base running has been improved. Strikeouts have come down. They're a lot more competitive, so it makes me want to watch a little bit more. But I just can't help it because all I keep saying is, okay, the players that are productive, let's move them along sooner or later so that, you hope Francisco Liriano keeps it up. You hope Jacoby Jones keeps it up. You hope maybe another player emerges so that you can trade him off. So that's all I'm looking at is who's going to be emerging so that we can trade him off. Then other people will message us and say, dude, this tanking thing that you keep saying is ridiculous. But that's the landscape of sports that we're in. I fully embrace it. So you earned the first pick overall in Major League Baseball's draft in 2017. I'm okay with doing it in 18 and 19 too to acquire talent. So in my mind, winning games just makes it like, okay, you could be around 500. That's fine for ticket sales. But in terms of rebuilding a team, I'm down for losing as many games as possible. What do you think? Am I crazy? Or do you say, you know what? Play 500 ball, learn how to win, and maybe some of these cats will be here when the rebuild actually is over?
I think you're a little crazy, but because I think you can't trade away everybody. And, I'm fully on board of the gigantic contracts. Guys like Miguel Cabrera, Nick Castellanos, Michael Fulmer, Francisco Liriano. I think those are guys, they've already been around, and those are the types of players that you want to try and move and get on teams. I think you have to be a little bit more careful with the younger players. Guys like Jacoby Jones and Jimmer Candelario are just at the beginning of their careers. These guys could be, cornerstones for this team. I don't really want to say that because I'm sure somebody will come back and say, oh, you said Jimmer Candelario, Jacoby Jones are going to be the best players of the team. No, that's not what I'm saying. But you need to be careful. You can't just trade them away unless you're going to get an assload of stuff for these guys, which, if that's what they end up doing, I'm fine with that. But these, I think they have potential. And when this team does get better and we start using some of the draft picks that we're going to be acquiring, then they could be the seasoned veterans who, that are the new players are going to be learning from.
So what do you make of this Tigers team? Are you interested? You go, wow, okay, you know what? They're whooping up on the White Sox and the Royals. Good. They're not going to be the worst team in the division. Or do you say to yourself, well, okay, I'll peek in every now and then, check the storylines. Obviously the weakness of the team is the bullpen. And when they collapse versus the Royals, you saw, earlier this week on Sunday, you saw that, oh man, Liriano did a good job taking a no-hitter into the sixth. But then you kind of have Buck Farmer, who's just a constant, disappointment. You have guys that you thought could be contributors like an Alex Wilson. He struggled mightily. And you go, well, okay, the bullpen is one of the weaknesses on the team. You recognize that you can't really count on them. And some days you just can't throw out Shane Green every single day. You can't have Jimenez play every single day. So you take it for what it's worth. But they are interesting to watch. I get the storylines. I get all that. But on my end, I'd rather just have them, fight hard and lose 5-4 every single game. I don't see the value right now in winning because I disagree with you totally. I feel like this roster right now in 2018, of the 25 guys, maybe 4 or 5 you're going to have around later on, and the rest are going to be filled up with the Mannings, with the Bo Burrows, and things like that, with the younger cats, the Faedos that are going to come in, maybe a Jimmer Candelario, maybe a Castellanos. But about that, in terms of who's on the team now, I feel like when you're starting a rebuild year one, you obviously know the veterans are going to be gone, and then you look at the rest of the roster, you basically can assume they're going to be gone. And when you look at the beginning of a rebuild, you recognize that this roster of talent is basically going to be in and of itself its own team. It's going to change mightily. It's going to look basically 80% different in 5 years than it looks now. So you hope they compete. You hope they play fundamentally hard. But in order to acquire bigger talent, you got to draft 1, 2, 3. So if you're not, then you're going, okay, well, what's this rebuild really looking at? And so when you have guys that are contributing, obviously you know who's going to be starting to move along. So I think you should change your focus a little bit and look at if a player's contributing, you got to start evaluating what's their trade value. Because if you can get 2 players for 1 with all these players, now you got, like I said, a boatload of 30, 40 players that can fill your minor league system and fill a roster that's going to actually compete in 5 to 7 years. This roster now, is not World Series caliber, and they're not even going to be around. You know it, and I think the players know it too. So that's why they're having fun. There's no pressure and things like that. We just need them to finish the final piece of the puzzle. Lose as many games as you can. It's okay. There's no expectation. It's fine.
I think the only thing though is it's hard to just go out and lose.
Yeah, that's the hard part.
I think you can see it in basketball. I think it's a little bit easier to do. But it's just so obvious if you actually go out and try to lose in baseball.
Tonight, when this podcast drops, check out the press clippings now of the interview Bryant Gumbel did with Derek Jeter. Bryant Gumbel and Derek Jeter kind of had a little bit of a verbal spat in that Derek Jeter called Bryant Gumbel mentally weak for keep prodding him and saying, is your team tanking? And Derek Jeter's like, no, we're going to compete and contend. And Brian's like, seriously? You traded X, Y, Z. You are trying to sell us that you're not tanking? And Derek Jeter's like, no, we're competing. And they went back and forth. And the interview is going to air on Real Sports on HBO. But, news of their rumbling and their heated exchange made the news. But it's hard for executives to admit it, and you can't really go out and say that. But the Marlins are tanking. Derek Jeter to come out and try and lie is disingenuous. At least the Tigers, step one, were the most open and honest and said, yeah, we're rebuilding. They're not saying, yeah, we're going out to tank, but they're honest. They're open and saying, look, we try to field a team that is going to be filled with youth and things like that. And, now the problem is, though, it just seems weird that the final piece of the puzzle for the Red Wings, Pistons, and Tigers, they can't accomplish. They can lose when it comes down to, big games to get into the playoffs, but when we then say, okay, go ahead, and we give you the green light to tank and lose, they don't do it. The Red Wings, finished with the 5th worst record when if they would have lost a great deal of their games, could have finished with the 2nd or 3rd worst schedule. You're like, okay. Then the Pistons, Reggie Jackson comes back, they start winning games. So you go, come on, no, we were mad when you didn't make the playoffs. When we wanted you to win, you didn't handle your business. Now when we give you the green light and accept that you suck, we give you the green light to tank, you don't do it. And it's just, come on, man.
The karma for fans, though. That's what you get when you want to root for teams to lose.
It's not rooting for them to lose. It's rooting for the
but you are still rooting for them to lose.
And if you want this talk from the dock to end, what has to happen is the league's got to go. We understand that the acquisition of talent via the draft is, what's causing this tanking. We are going to remodify the qualification to get the number one pick so that teams don't tank. You want to stop this conversation? The teams with the worst record don't get as many balls in the they don't get as many chances to get the number one pick. It's just an equal system, and everybody gets one ball, and here we go. And so maybe there's a chance next year that the Golden State Warriors get the number one pick, and that you stop weighting the system. It's just completely random.
I think you can
randomize it.
It's not all the entire league, though.
People are talking, Jason. Many people are talking because of the fact that in order to acquire talent, to get to championship levels, that the only way to do it is to lose epically to get the number one pick because of the ratio of ping pong balls that you get when your team sucks. But if you make it, look, every league, every draft, you get one ping pong ball. It goes in the hopper, and we shoot it up. And if no matter of record, we don't weight the records. We don't weight it. It's just, here's a league, here are the teams, and when the time comes, we go 1 through 32, and the ball is decided. So that makes it, wouldn't that be great if you had the Pistons scenario back in the day in 2004 where they were a good team and got the second pick? Now the Pistons blew it and didn't take the right guy to continue their dynasty. But imagine if the Rockets got the number one pick. That would make for fun. That would make it so that each game in the regular season meant more. Right now, people are concrete that our team tank are like, look, can you compete? No, tank. That is, unless you could tell me another scenario in which you acquire better talent faster, tanking is an avenue that is one of the primary ways of getting the top 2 and 3 picks in the current climate. Now, you want to shut me up? Change it and erase this notion that the top pick goes to more teams that suck. That's the way it is.
We could go to the MLS style where they basically assign where players go.
Is that how they do it?
Yeah, it's part of the way you do it, but I don't know. It's all broken. Sports is broken.
Do you say with the Tigers that it's a small sample size that eventually, if you give it another 80 games, they'll, especially this current stretch where they're going to play a lot of games on the road versus some decent teams. Pittsburgh now, they're in a series versus on the road. Just be like, look, Doc, it's a small sample size, 20 games. Just give it another 20, and they'll probably be 3-17.
I think there's probably a better chance of that than seeing them have a winning record.
Okay.
But I'm gonna stick. This team isn't horrible, and that's not a good thing. That's not a bad thing. It's just what it is. This is what this team is, and I will stick that this is team. They're going to be around 500 the majority of the way until they start selling off pieces.
Great podcast. I missed, when I was on vacation, having the time to banter with you. I know some things went down at Michigan State that we're going to continue to let evolve before we decide with the administration and all that, and some things that have come out. So that will definitely be talked about later on in future episodes of the podcast. We're 150 down. I love it. 150 episodes of this podcast. Thanks, everybody, for finding us anywhere you can find podcasts. You can follow Jason at Jarvie the King. You can message us anytime at Detroit Podcast. Always enjoy the hour we spend together, sir.
Indeed, and until next week, when we will talk about who the Lions have on their roster now from the draft. He's John. I'm Jason. Peace out.
Okay, nice, idiot. You. Bye-bye.
Good day, sir. I said good day.
All right. Take care now. Bye-bye then.
Loser.